Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kyne. Today's video is going to be a sewing tutorial, if you couldn't tell from the title, and I received a request a couple of days back. I was going through my comments and somebody had asked for a long sleeve leotard tutorial, and I was like, I can make that happen. So I was at the fabric store and I came across this two-way sequin fabric and also this rainbow hollow fringe, and I was like, let me make the gayest thing I've ever made. And I own some pretty gay ass shit, so it was a challenge, but I think I rose to the occasion. I've made some bodysuits in the past, I've made sleeves, but I've never done anything with sequin fabric, and I've never done anything with fringe, or anything with a zipper in the back. So all of those three things I'm gonna cover in this video. After I was done, I was almost like, is this too much? Like, is this too tacky even for me? But I've never received so many DMs on Instagram within one single day, so you guys are my people. I'll tell you everything you need for this video. You're gonna want about 1 yard. I tend to get a little bit more than I think I'm gonna need because I always mess up and like do something wrong. So I got 1.5 yards, but technically you should only really need 1 yard of the two-way sequin fabric. And then for this fringe, I got it at the store actually. I was like about to leave and then I saw this and I'm like, you're coming home with me. I got 4 yards of this like sequin fringe trim. You're gonna want more or less depending on how full it is, like just as a strip, and then you just layer it on itself. And then I got a zipper, and that's pretty much it. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial, and I'll hand it over to VoiceOver Kyne now. Thanks, Kyne. So I've got 1.5 yards of this two-way sequin fabric, and sequins are notoriously hard to sew on, so we're gonna try to make sure all of the sequins are laying flat by brushing it all one way, so resist the temptation to play with it, at least for now. I've got my bathing suit pattern and my sleeve pattern, which I just traced these from previous things that fit me really snug, and you can check out my bodysuit tutorial for how I make this shape. I feel like I used to talk crap about patterns in the past, but they just take away the guesswork from sewing. And you only really need a few basic patterns in your arsenal to be the foundation of every garment you make. Now, because of how thick this stuff is, I can't cut on a fold and do these shortcuts where I get multiple pieces with one cut. We have to cut out each piece individually, but this will give you a better idea of what we're doing anyway, even if you're copying this tutorial on something that's not sequins. We're just cutting out 2 identical pieces for the front and the back and 2 identical sleeves. Usually I like to make my front or back neckline really low so that I can step into it, but today I wanted to show you guys how to install a zipper so you can add that to your toolbox of skills. So my front and back are going to be exactly identical. One mistake that I should remark here is my fabric only stretches in one direction, which that's also called two-way stretch. But the pattern that I have was made for 4-way stretch fabric that stretches a lot more, since that's kind of what I'm used to doing. So basically what I made was a little too small. I had to end up doing some of this twice, which is what I meant by getting more fabric than you might anticipate you might need to give yourself room for mistakes. So the lesson to be learned is make sure your patterns are big enough to fit you without relying on the stretch of the fabric, because not every fabric stretches by the same amount. So I've definitely updated my pattern since this. You know, sometimes I get shady comments about the fact that I make tutorials for things that I'm not an expert about, but I like to tell you guys about my mistakes and how I fix them and go back and change things, because I want to show you the process of what it's really like when I make stuff. Sidebar, when you're working with sequins, you will soon find out this shit is messy. It's messier than me at the club after 6 vodka sodas. I had to sweep the floors like a dozen times, vacuum a dozen times, and there's still sequins everywhere. Oh my god. Anyway, moving on, now that I have a front, back, and 2 sleeves, I'm gonna take my back piece and install the zipper. I get mine light to medium weight. You definitely want to make sure they're good quality, and I usually get a length of about 50 to 60 centimeters. This particular one separates at the end for like jackets that open up, but we don't need that feature here. It's efficient to just have it stop at the end, so you can actually create a zipper stopper just with a needle and thread. Wherever you want to stop the zipper, just do some loops there and then cut off the excess. And I like to make my zipper go right to the top of my butt. The length of your zipper is up to you and how stretchy the fabric is without it, but my recommendation is to go a little bit on the longer side versus the shorter side, so at least you won't have a problem getting into it. You're gonna make a straight vertical cut down the back, that's the length of the zipper, and now we're gonna sew the zipper in. So the zipper has a right side and so does the fabric. It might not be a surprise to you that we're gonna face them right sides together so that the edge of the zipper is up against the edge of the fabric. Not the metal edge of the teeth, but the edge of the fabric that's on the zipper, just like this. And you're gonna pin the zipper in place and just sew a straight stitch all the way down. Now your sewing machine may or may not come with a zipper foot, and a zipper foot is just an attachment that allows the needle to get very close to the metal teeth so that the zipper is as discreet as possible. I'll give you a close-up. So you can see that little spot right there is where the needle is hitting, which you can see is very close to the metal teeth. If you don't have this attachment, not a big deal. Now, when I come to the head or like handle of the zipper, I'm gonna manually stop sewing and move it to the other side of the needle and then move on, which is gonna require stopping and lifting the foot and the needle because you need to be sewing on a flat surface and that handle would not fit. But as you can see, sewing a zipper is not as hard as it seems. Once you finish one side, just do the same thing on the other side. I found that when I tried this on, the sequins would get stuck in the zipper and make it hard to open and close, which we all can relate to how annoying that is. So I took a pair of tweezers and plucked out some individual sequins. You can also use a pair of scissors, just so that there's no sequins close enough to the zipper to make it stuck. Takes a bit of work, but I'd rather take my time here than be frustrated trying to zip this shut when I'm getting dressed. Now that we've added a zipper to our back piece, we're going to attach it to our front by pinning them right sides together and then sewing along the shoulders, sides of the torso, and on the crotch. Now, because of the zipper, the front and back don't match up perfectly anymore, which is another thing you should take into consideration when you're cutting out your pieces, so make them bigger to compensate for this loss. Or just be skinnier like me. Now for the sleeves, using the pieces we cut out, and I showed this shape earlier, I'm sewing them shut by folding them right sides together and doing a straight stitch from where the armpit would be all the way to the end. I should mention here that what I should have done is added the fringe here right now by stuffing it all inside the sleeves. I had something else planned, but then changed my mind, as you'll see later on, but in retrospect, this should have been the time to do it. It'll make sense later. Anyway, before sewing this to the main bodysuit, you can try it on your arm to make sure it fits. It should go all the way up to your shoulder where your arm like bends. I mean, we spend most of our time with our arms down, so the top of the sleeve has to be longer than the bottom. Flip your bodysuit inside out and the sleeve right side out and line them up so that the arm is pointing down as it naturally would. Then flip it horizontally and in this direction feed it through the sleeve hole and pin it together at the shoulder. Line it up at the armpits of both pieces and also at the shoulders of both pieces. That's how I always start, and then I just go around in the circle. Sequin fabric takes a lot of patience to sew with. I recommend buying some extra needles for your machine because I definitely broke a needle or two doing this. Just work slow, and if you feel your machine stalling, lift the needle and shift the fabric by like 1 millimeter just to move the sequin out from directly under the needle. My machine didn't really have a hard time piercing through sequin, but sometimes needles can get dull, so have extras on hand. Anyway, here is the leotard so far. If you want just a long sleeve leotard like the person who commented this request, you can stop right here, or you can add a hem or elastic to the raw edges. I ended up deciding not to. But like I said in the beginning, I found the sequin fringe I wanted to work with, and my initial idea was to make it into a skirt that would hang off the bottom. So I folded it over a bunch of times until it matched my waist measurement, and I tried it on, and I wasn't really loving it. It didn't match what I had in mind, but then I got the idea to put it on my sleeves, which is why I said earlier, if I had known this is what I wanted to do from the beginning, I would have done the sleeves differently. But you're gonna see how I worked around that. So first, in any case, we have to measure out the fringe trim. I cut it in half, however much I had and I wanted to work with, so I'd have an equal length on both arms. And I measured out the lengths from my wrists to my armpits, which is where I want the fringe to fall. It ended up being 22 inches, so I took however much fringe I had, folded it over and over on itself in 22-inch sections. The reason why is it's gonna come a little scrappy looking, because they're cheap, and we want a more full, thick fringe, so we have to layer it. And you can use as many layers as you think you might need depending on how full it is, or if you're like me, however many you can afford. So now I have to figure out how to attach it to the sleeve once it's already fully done. The solution I came up with was to open up the sleeve seam again. I tried to just rip out the thread, which is what you should do, but because this was sequin fabric, it was really hard to cut open the thread, so I just had to cut open like the fabric all the way, stopping right before I hit the armpit. I stuffed the fringe inside the sleeve and stitched it back shut with that white trim that it's all attached to sticking out. By sandwiching this into the stitch, it attached the fringe to the sleeve while also hiding some of that white trim it's attached to. I regret cutting open the sleeve and stitching it back again because that fabric that we cut off and threw out means that the sleeve is now tighter than what we had anticipated in our measurements. But if you're watching this tutorial, you can know not to make that mistake. Like I said earlier, I would measure out the fringe and stuff it inside the sleeve before I even attach the sleeve to the bodysuit. So if you remember that remark from earlier, that's what I'm talking about. But they say hindsight is 20/20, and I'm 36, 26, 36. Anyway, doing the same thing to the other arm now. When you pull it inside out, you'll see all the fringe falls beautifully from the seam. The reason why I wanted to do that is I didn't want to add another seam to the sleeve. I wanted to insert the fringe into the seam that was already made by sewing the sleeve shut. So that's pretty much the finished garment. The last thing I did to finish this off is I cut off all the excess fabric that was on the insides, so I didn't have all this excess fabric up against my skin, which, considering it's sequin, could actually be quite painful. But now that we're done, this is how it looks. Welcome back! So this is the finished look. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something cool today. I was considering adding like a hem to this top neckline and to like the leg holes. But the thing is, like, if you folded it under and then sewed it, it wouldn't have really made that much of a difference. And I could have added like some bias tape or elastic there, but I didn't want like that bold color to show up. I just wanted the edges to be sequin. Another thing I should mention when it comes to hair, the ideal type of hair you're gonna want to wear with this would be like an updo, because you don't want the hair really touching the sequin because it can get caught. But I don't really follow rules, do I? Obviously, you don't need to make this entire thing. You can just take the technique for the fringe. You can just learn from how I applied the zipper. You can just make a plain long sleeve leotard with any sort of fabric. But hopefully you learned something from this video that you can take away and try on your own. But until next time, I hope you guys all enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!